Hello, everybody. I know I have launched this a little bit early. I will fully admit I was excited. I just wanted to start. So we're starting a little bit early, and I am very, very excited for this. You guys, I have to just tell you, it has been a week. It has been a very, very long week for me, and I literally was questioning, come on, camera, focus. There we go. I think we're better now. I was literally questioning how much energy I was going to have to bring to this. Okay, no, we are still out of focus. Camera, figure yourself out. Okay, there we go. If you ever have a camera get out of focus, just do that. Put your hand in front of it. It usually works. But I literally was wondering how I was going to muster the energy for this webinar. And I wrapped my day. I finished all of my stuff for my day job. I meditated, and now I'm ready and raring to go. So let's go ahead and let's dive straight into this baby. I am actually just going to go ahead and share my entire screen here, and we are going to jump in. So we are going to be talking today best practices for preventing burnout in your business. And actually, hold on really quickly. What I'm going to go ahead and do so that I can see if you guys do have questions in the chat. I am going to go ahead and pull it up so that I can make sure I can see said chat. Let's see here. I actually think I just need to steal this tab. Beautiful. Okay, so if you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Hello, Ananya. It's nice. Yeah, yes, you can. I'm so excited to see you here. So now I can go ahead and I can see the chat. So let's go ahead and dive into this. So as I mentioned, today we are going to be talking about best practices for preventing burnout in your business. Now, this is definitely going to be a webinar where I'm going to be talking to business owners, to people who maybe have a side hustle. That's not to say that if you are somebody who is in the corporate environment or you're a teacher that you won't benefit from some of the nuggets inside of this. I think everything's still applicable, even if you don't have a business. But I will definitely, as we go through this, I will be talking to business owners in particular with some of the examples that I'm going to be sharing. I have done this webinar before. I did it for a group of entrepreneurs as well as for a women's network for women-owned businesses. And I'm excited today because I plan on this taking probably about an hour, but we may go longer than that because I now have the ability to kind of give you a little bit more of a sneak peek inside of some of my systems, some of how I do some of the things that we're going to be talking about. So this is going to be an even deeper dive in than some of the stuff that I've done for those other groups. So let's go ahead and let's jump in. I do have a little bit here on kind of me and my background. I'm going to go through this very, very quickly. I have a background in science. I spent 10 years doing biomedical research until I kind of realized that wasn't my thing. And in fact, that was one of the very things that was burning me out. And so long story short, I left my PhD program. I left with a master's. I went into coaching. I became a certified professional coach. I now have 2 separate stress specializations. So 2 certifications in stress specific coaching. And I've also done speaking for LinkedIn. Yeah, that LinkedIn, Avery Dennison, as well as some universities. And I have been featured in Fast Company, Reader's Digest, and Brains Magazine. So that's a little bit of background on me, a very, very quick background, because I want to get into the meat of this webinar today. And one of the first things I want you to kind of think about as I talk through this is I firmly, firmly believe that burnout happens, but staying burned out is a choice. And when I say that, I'm not saying that I think you want to be burned out, that you want to be stressed out. What I mean when I say that is that burnout and stress are the culmination of the choices that we make, the things we take on, the relationships that we have, the careers and the jobs that we choose to pursue, even the things that we are choosing to be our systems that support our lifestyle. It is the sum total of the choices that we make in our lives. And that's what I mean when I say staying burned out is a choice. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today is about awareness. It's about recognizing when something in your life, whether it's your mindset, your systems, the way you're approaching self-care isn't working, and then working to fix that thing. So I don't think anybody chooses to be burned out, but I think of once we realize that burnout and stress are the culmination of the choices that we're making and how those choices are fitting together and impacting our lives, it's a much more empowering perspective to come from, to realize that we have the power to make changes. And I love coming at burnout from that perspective. So keep this in mind today. Today, what I am going to show you is I'm going to show you why sustainability is the name of the game when it comes to burnout. Everything we do should come from the lens of, can I sustain what I am putting on my plate, or can I not? So sustainability is the name of the game. And I'm going to show you the 3 places where you absolutely fundamentally need more sustainability if you're going to prevent burnout in your business and in your life. And I'm also lastly going to show you how to create more sustainability in those places. So that's a little bit of where we're going. And let's start with, what is sustainability? So I got my water bottle here, in case my voice starts to get a little hoarse. But sustainability is, by definition, the ability to be maintained at a certain rate or level. For all of us, whether we are talking about our health, our career, our business, our mindset or our mood, we want to be able to sustain good moods. We want to be able to sustain successful careers. We want to be able to sustain our health. Everything is about sustainability. We don't want to just achieve something and then have it go away. That's not what any of us are aiming for. We want to be able to sustain and maintain the things in our lives, right? So sustainability is the name of the game, and that's very much what we're going to be talking about today. So in your business or in your career, if you are in corporate and you're thinking about it from that lens, we need sustainability in 3 places. We need sustainability in our mindsets, in our systems, and in our self-care. Mindsets is step 1. And I frankly think that it should be a requirement if you establish a business. If you have an LLC, you should be required to do some mindset work, in my opinion. We're going to touch base on what it means to have a sustainable mindset and how to get clarity on that. But I also think even in our careers, there should be, in my opinion, since I work with high schoolers in my day job, I think there should be a requirement to do some kind of deep dive mindset work before we pick our careers. I actually was on a call this morning, a networking call, where we were talking about what our big Oprah-sized visions for our business was. And my Oprah-sized vision for my business is, I want to change the way we work. And I want to change the way we make decisions about our careers, because I think so many of us make decisions from the place of should. We make decisions from the place of, my parents want me to do this. For example, we make decisions from the perspective of, well, so-and-so says I should do this, so that's what I'm going to do. And we oftentimes lose track of ourselves in that. So that's very much the mindset piece, coming back to what we as an individual, as a human being, want for ourselves. Sustainability is step 2. Systems is step 2, because our systems are either helping us or hurting us when it comes to our business, our careers, and frankly, our lives. This is about automations, workflows, information and task management. I am going to talk about Notion today. For those of you who are not Notion users yet, don't worry, I'll tell you what it is. For those of you that are Notion users, yes, we're going to talk about Notion. But it's also, when it comes to our systems, it's not just about those outside pieces. It's about the commitments we make. It's about the things we take on for ourselves and knowing when we're taking on too much. And then lastly, our self-care, because this is a burnout and stress management talk. You're not going to get through this without me talking about self-care, right? So this is all about recognizing that whether you are a business owner, a side hustler, or somebody who has a corporate career, your most important asset is you. And yet for most of us, we are the last thing we prioritize. In your business, you are your most important business asset. And yet we often put our needs on the back burner. In our careers, even though maybe corporate America might try to convince you otherwise, you are your most important asset in your career. Your brain, if you do knowledge work, your brain is the most important asset in your career and in your work. We've got to start taking better care of ourselves. And I'm going to give us some tangible ways to do that. So within these 3 types of areas, the reason why I love these 3 areas is we tackle the different types of burnout in each of these 3 areas. In our mindsets, we're tackling emotional and boredom burnout. And I'm going to talk about what each of these are. In our systems, we're talking about overwhelm burnout, because, when we get overwhelmed, it is usually because we don't have systems that properly support the moving parts in our lives. And then lastly, our self-care. This is all about physical burnout and emotional burnout, because when we don't take care of ourselves, those are usually the pieces that falter, that physical burnout and the emotional burnout. And we're going to give some very transparent, very real examples when we get to this section about kind of some of the things that I'm being currently challenged by. So these are kind of the 3 areas that we're going to tackle today. So let's go ahead and start with what it means to have a sustainable mindset. First and foremost, this is less about the mindset being sustainable and more about your mindset sustaining you. What is going to get you through the hard times in your business or in your career? What's going to keep you motivated and on track? Some of what we're going to be talking about today is actually directly related to what I call the Biz Mindset Journal. This is something that is available to people who are inside of my Inner Circle membership. It is a part of my Notion digital planner. It is also something that you can just get my Burned Out Biz Owners bundle for my Notion templates on my website. But I actually want to, this is where we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive. I want to show you what this baby looks like. Inside of, we're going to go inside of my templates. Inside of here, inside of the Burned Out Business Owners bundle, I have the Biz Mindset Journal, and it is chock full of all of these different questions that we need to ask ourselves about the obstacles that are in the way. Yeah, maybe about our business plans, about our beliefs about money, all of these different things that are important to understand about yourself as a business owner, which I think we should do before we get started in business. But frankly, it doesn't matter how deep into business you are. Really knowing and understanding where you're at with these different parts of your mindset are really, really crucial. So I have all of these inside of the Burned Out Business Owners bundle. For those of you that have the Notion digital planner, if you want to figure out where this is in your planner, drop a comment, shoot me a message after this, let me know, and I can give you directions for where to find this. But what we're going to go ahead and do for today, let me go ahead and get this guy back full screen, is I've got some questions that I want us to start with. But before we get into those questions, let's talk about why we're talking about this. Emotional burnout is why we're talking about this. Emotional burnout is the reason why we need to look at our mindset, why we need to look at our beliefs, why we need to understand and have awareness around those things. Because emotional burnout is, I think, perhaps the most pervasive form of burnout and also the most debilitating. Emotional burnout is the fulfillment side of burnout. And it's very, very easy to ignore because we're in a culture that says just hustle, just push through, just be disciplined, just show up and get it done. So a lot of us tend to bury this. But some signs that you can look for are if you feel like your emotions are all over the place. Maybe you're really, really quick to tears or really, really quick to anger. Those are powerful signs of emotional burnout, strong indicators, especially if you're typically a very emotionally stable person. It could also be your social life is going downhill. Perhaps because of the fact that your emotions are all over the place, you're not feeling that motivation to go socialize. It also could be numbing behavior. So these are things like eating too much, drinking too much. We numb with TV shows. We numb with social media. We numb with, I'm actually currently doing, and it sounds crazy, and I'm really proud of myself so far, I'm doing a 12-month shopping ban. Not groceries. I'm allowed to buy consumables like food, but I am doing a 12-month shopping ban because I find that when I'm kind of in an emotional situation, I tend to just retail therapy. I go online and I buy things that I don't need. That's a numbing behavior, you know? And then lastly, apathy, negativity, or pessimism. Especially if you were a very high achieving personality, somebody who's always been a go-getter, really, really pushed themselves, always wanted more and to do more and to be more and to achieve more. Typically, we are very, very motivated people. But when we are in emotional burnout, that's when we start to get very apathetic and pessimistic and very unmotivated. So these are some signs of emotional burnout. There's also some boredom burnout in this. This is another reason why it's important to know our mindset. This is a very, very sneaky form of burnout. It takes a lot of energy to engage yourself in things that you don't feel excited about. And that's why this is one to be very aware of, because sometimes we kind of get into a pattern in our businesses or in our career where we're just going through the motions day in and day out. And that can lead to emotional burnout, or that can lead to burnout as well. So some things to look for here is if you feel a lack of fulfillment and motivation in what you're doing, you don't feel challenged by the work that you're doing. There's actually like this crazy sweet spot when it comes to how well we perform. We actually have to be pushed out of our comfort zone just a little bit to be performing at our peak. So if you're feeling very unchallenged by the work that you're doing, that's a strong sign of boredom burnout or potential for boredom burnout. And then lastly, feeling like you're going through the motions. These are all signs of boredom burnout. And these are the two forms of burnout that really understanding your mindset and kind of what you want and what the drivers are for you can really help you start to address. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to ask some important questions. These are some very important questions to ask yourself to make sure that I call it your biz mindset, is sustainable. But again, if you are in corporate or you work outside of having a business or a side hustle, same thing. These are still really important questions for us to know to make sure that our career is going to sustain us. So first and foremost, what does success mean to you? That's the first question that we can ask ourselves. And if you've got a notebook nearby, feel free to answer these questions now. I might move through them a little bit too quickly for you to be able to answer them live, but the recording to this will be accessible to everybody after this is over. So feel free to, if you just kind of want to, maybe you had some first thoughts pop up of what success means to you, jot those down. And then maybe you come back to this after the webinar where you can really pause and kind of dig deep and think. But that's the first question. What does success mean to you? If you're a business owner, asking yourself, what is your ultimate goal of your business? It was really fun this morning. Maybe you even think of this like, what is your Oprah-sized vision for your business? What's your Oprah-sized goal for your business? Perhaps your goal is 5-figure months or having a 7-figure business, or maybe you just want the freedom to be able to take the rest of the day off when you're not having a good day, be able to take a mental health day without having to ask anybody. Maybe that's success to you. But what does success mean to you? What is the ultimate goal of the work that you're doing and the lifestyle you're trying to create for yourself? Being intimately familiar with your definition of success as opposed to someone else's definition of success is really important. You know, for a lot of us, a lot of the students I work with in my day job, their definition of success is often their parents' definition of success. Very, very rarely, and very few of the students I work with in my day job, do they have clarity on what their own personal definition of success is. And you know what? No judgment to them. When you're that age, it's hard to know what you want outside of what you've been told to want your entire life. But really digging into what does success mean to you, that's important. The next question, what does work-life balance look like to you? This is another really important question to ask, especially from the perspective of burnout and stress. I can tell you what work-life balance means to me, but that might not be your definition. That might not be something you agree with. This is one of those things that nobody can tell you what work-life balance is. It depends on your values. It depends on your circumstance. It depends on your situation. A stay-at-home mom's perspective on work-life balance is going to look very, very different than a nurse's. A nurse who has no kids, or a business owner, or an entrepreneur. Our definitions of work-life balance, even as entrepreneurs, are going to vary. You really have to answer this for yourself. And to kind of help with this, something to keep in mind is your productivity style. You may not know this, but there's actually 2 different forms of productivity. And these do operate on a spectrum. It's not like you're either one or the other. You might fall somewhere in between. The first one is the integrator. The integrator is somebody who does not have a traditional view on work or balance. They do not have a definite end to their workday. They more approach work as fitting it into pockets of time around their life. This might be the person who maybe they don't start working until 10 or 11 because they spend the entire morning really pouring into their family or themselves. And then they work for a couple hours, and then they might go have a long lunch with a friend, and then work for a couple more hours, and then take a break for dinner in the evening with their family, and then work for a couple more hours. They do not have a I work from 9 to 5 approach to working and to productivity. They work in pockets and in spurts. As opposed to that, we've got the segmenter. That's kind of the opposite side of the spectrum. So an integrator, they kind of let work fit where it will. The segmenter, they like to keep things in their life very separate. You know, they have work times of their life and they have personal times of their life. They want work to fit in a designated time. This is the person that likes the 9 to 5 setup. They like knowing this is when I work and this is when I'm done working. So kind of think about where might you fall on that. To give you an example, with my business, I'm more of an integrator, actually. That might be surprising given the fact that I do burnout and stress management coaching. But I find that my preference is to work when I feel like working, work when, I have inspiration or ideas, work when I'm feeling in flow. And sometimes I'm not. I will show up. I have the discipline to be able to show up when I need to show up. But my preference is to work more like an integrator, to work in those pockets of time. In my day job, I'm much more of a segmenter. I do not start working in my day job until a certain cutoff time. I will not let myself, because it is so easy for my day job to take over my life, and I will not let it. I refuse. So you can have different productivity styles around different things, or you can kind of approach your entire life from one like holistic perspective. But kind of ask yourself, where might you fall on that productivity style? That might say a lot about your approach to work-life balance. Like for me, work-life balance does not mean I only work 40 hours a week or I only work on these days. Work-life balance to me really is more of, I feel like I have a life outside of what I'm doing at work. I feel like I have plenty of time to socialize, to engage in hobbies, to take care of myself. I feel like I have plenty of time for those things, and that I still have a little bit of time to just relax and be still. That's kind of what work-life balance is for me. So again, if you've got any questions as we go through this, let me know in the chat. I'm happy to answer. I am glancing over occasionally to make sure I don't miss anything. But those are our first important questions. The next question is, what are your values? Is your business representative of those values? But let's just start with the first question. What are your values? Do you actually know what your core values are? And I encourage you with this, don't just go with the things that are cookie cutter. Like a lot of people who value relationships, they might say, oh, I value family. But do you really value family, or do you value something deeper that you get from family? For example, my value around relationships is belonging. I love my family dearly, but there are instances and times where I actually don't feel a lot of belonging with my family. And I'm sure we've all had that experience as well. I love my family, but when it comes to my relationships, I value belonging. I value feeling like I can be completely vulnerable with people, that I can, maybe if I'm having a moment, I can break down in tears and nobody's going to judge me for that. That's what I value in my relationships. Another one of my values that is also related to relationships is authenticity. I value when people are their complete, true, and authentic selves, because that makes me feel like I have permission to be my complete, true, and authentic self. That's part of the reason why I love this community, and I love the people that bring into it, because I feel like we're very similar in the sense that I am not a very put together human. I never wear makeup. I'm literally in workout gear right now. I have like my favorite Eddie Bauer sweatshirt on and yoga pants on. I feel like I can show up as my completely true, authentic self. And just because I have this business, just because I'm a coach, I don't need to show up in a blazer with my hair done. I can just be me. And me is very, very casual. I was asked at one point in time, if your business was an alcoholic beverage, what kind of alcoholic beverage would it be? And my answer was a craft beer, because I'm very casual. I'm a very laid back person. But what are your values? What are your values? Do you know what your values are? And if you don't, that's okay. There are things you can do. I actually have a values mini course inside of my Inner Circle membership that helps you identify what those values are. So if you don't know, that's okay. There's ways in which we can find our values. And for those of you, again, that are business owners, if you know your values, is your business representative of them? Because that is probably the quickest path to burnout in your career and in your business, is when you have a misalignment between your business or your career and your values. If I didn't feel like I could be my authentic self in doing the work that I do, this would not be work that I would want to do. If I didn't feel like I could create freedom in my lifestyle with the work that I'm building here, I would not build this business, because that's another one of my values, to feel like I have freedom and flexibility and agency and autonomy. That's really important to me. So are your values aligning with your business and your career? And some of these questions might not be questions you can tangibly answer right now. They're just meant to get you thinking. They're meant to get you thinking about the alignment that you do have in your life. And then perhaps the most important question that I have in this deck, whose opinion matters? If you're a business owner, whose opinion matters in your business? For a lot of us, and did I fall guilty to this when I first started my business? For a lot of us, we let, our business coaches, our friend who's more successful than us, we let their opinions and sometimes their values override our own. This is really about how are you going to weigh the input of others without losing yourself? In my business, for a long time, I was told, Ellen, you should coach productivity because you're good at that. I love productivity. We're going to talk about Notion a little bit later. I love systems. I nerd out on that stuff. But I also love the mindset work. I love getting into the nitty gritty of why do we do what we do? Why do we make the decisions we make? What motivates us to do things? My work would feel incomplete without that. So all of those people, I listened to them for far too long, but all of those people who were telling me to do productivity coaching, they didn't know that about me. They didn't know that I burned out in graduate school and how important it was for me to address that in my work and to make sure I could help other people not do that. They didn't know, the fact that I started in health and fitness coaching. Part of what I love about doing what I do is it brings all of my past experiences together. And they didn't know that. And they couldn't know that, but I was letting their opinions and their perspectives override my own. That's a problem. Same thing with when I left graduate school, when I dropped out of my PhD, my dad, true story, straight up told me he was disappointed when I left graduate school. He's not now. He's very happy for me now, but he was at the time. And if I had let his opinions and perspectives override my own, I might be Dr. Ellen right now, but who knows where my career would be, where I would be in my life, and frankly, how happy I would be. It is worth not being Dr. Ellen to have a lot more clarity and a lot more fulfillment in the work that I do. And trust me, Dad's on board. My dad asks about my business all the time now. It's kind of funny. So whose opinion matters in your life? And how are you going to, it's okay to have people, give you advice and give you different perspectives, but make sure you have some clarity on how you're going to weigh that input, their input and those perspectives without letting them overrule and override your own. These are all important questions to ask when it comes to having a sustainable mindset. Once we have the answers to these questions, these become very, very powerful tools to help us make sure our business are aligned and on track. We can check the things that we are doing in our business against these very questions. They keep us in alignment. Oh my goodness, my internet just crashed. Hold on, let's reload. Okay, this is something that I actually kind of love about going live is that whatever happens, happens, and you guys just see it. Like, you just get to see what happens. Okay, where did we leave off? We were right here. Beautiful. That was interesting. I don't know what just happened there. But these are the things that keep us in alignment. So we can focus on building businesses that are true to us. This is such important work when it comes to your business and when it comes to your career, because I'm sure we all want to still be doing the work that we started off being so passionate about years from now. I think the biggest reason perhaps, obviously there's a funding component to this, but I think a big contributor to why so many businesses don't last is because people don't make sure that the business they are building is actually in alignment with who they are and what they want to contribute. I think that's massive. So spend some time thinking about some of these questions. And again, there will be a replay and I'll actually copy those questions and drop them below the video so you don't have to rewatch if you don't want to. Now, when it comes to business, a CEO retreat is a great time to do this work. This is actually something that I did for the first time earlier this year, about 4 weeks ago. Is the first time I did this because this is something that I skipped doing in my business for way too long. I, obviously had clarity on some of the questions we talked about tonight, what success means to me, what my values are, what work-life balance means to me. But a lot of those other questions that I showed you earlier, I never answered those questions. I skipped those up until earlier this year. And as a result of that, I have had to do a lot of things in my business purely by trial and error. And that was until I took that CEO retreat earlier this year. What I did is I literally went to, and even if you're in, corporate America, you can do this for your career. I went to an island that is literally 15 minutes. I live in the Pacific Northwest, so having islands nearby is not that weird. But I went to Vashon Island, which is a 15-minute ferry ride from where I live. And I stayed at this place that was kind of isolated, not a lot to do, not a lot around, very, very cozy. And I just kind of hunkered down for the weekend and did some of that behind the scenes work that we usually skip in your business. And this is one of the things that I did. I sat down and I answered all of these questions for the first time in my business. And I don't think I've ever had such clarity going into a year as I do this time. But again, you can do this if you just start in corporate. You have a corporate career that you are building. You can do these same exact things to understand what your motivations are and whether your career is helping fulfill those. The other thing that's important when we talk about a sustainable mindset is boundaries. Absolutely is boundaries. And when it comes to boundaries, this could include a number of different things. It could include your content consumption. What shows you are watching, who you follow on social media, how long you are spending consuming that content, and having some boundaries around those things. Just this really looks like paying attention to the patterns that you're seeing that are potentially problematic and shifting those. That's really all it comes down to. Once you identify something that you realize, hey, you know what, this maybe isn't a good idea for me, make a game plan and kind of almost, again, scientist here, kind of almost experiment to find ways for how you might fix it. I have actually found, I have an Apple Watch, but 90% of my notifications on my Apple Watch are turned off, except for hearing from specific people. So 90% of the time, my phone isn't even near me. It's actually like back in my living room. That's one of the ways I limit content consumption is my phone does not come to my desk with me. It could also mean boundaries around your social commitments. How many commitments you take on, what days you let yourself, take on social commitments. Potentially even who you take on those commitments with. Your boundaries might mean what you are or are not willing to add to your calendar. I think, more so than just being able to schedule with people, a calendar, you can kind of think of it like sacred space in your life. And each time you put something on a calendar, is that something that you are willing to take up space, willing to let take up space in your life? Some things absolutely we have less control over than we might want, especially if you are in corporate or you have a particularly demanding client. As business owners, I think we have a lot more control than we think we do. A lot more control than we say we do. We might say, oh, this client, they're just difficult and I just have to kind of appease them. You also don't have to work with that client. Even in corporate, if you have a corporate job that is literally taking over your life, do you really need to be in that corporate job? In school, even, we can change our schedules. We can take on slightly less in school. We can, if we're struggling, we can talk to our advisors or our professors and see if there's modifications that can be made to better accommodate things. There are much more choices that we have instead of just feeling like we're helpless. So what are you and are you not willing to put on your calendar? It also might be when you are available to respond to people, respond to personal emails, respond to client emails if you're a business owner. When are you available to do that work? I'm going to actually touch more on this one in just a second. And it's also about the time that you spend in silence. This, I actually think, needs to be more of a common practice for most of us. Spending that time in silence. Spending time in silence is important sensory rest, which we're going to talk about a little bit more later. It's important for tapping into your intuition. So if you're really, really struggling answering some of those questions we talked about previously, spending more time in silence and getting more used to spending time in silence is going to help you tap into your intuition so that you can start understanding your motivations and understanding those answers to those questions. So that might be something that you include as well. But let's touch a little bit more on when you are available to respond. This right here, and I have something very, very similar in my day job. This is my email signature. I've actually changed my email signature slightly from this, but it still has this note at the bottom. And this is the important thing that we're going to touch on. I say in my email signature, note, I do not check my email after 7 p.m. Pacific time or on the weekends, because couldn't we all use a little bit more disconnection and be a little less available? I have that at the bottom of my business email signature. And I have literally never had somebody complain about hearing back from me. Because what I love about this is not only am I setting a boundary, I am communicating that boundary by putting it in my email signature, which we can't just set boundaries in our heads. We have to share them with the people they impact. But what it also does is it communicates it, and then it holds me accountable to it. You know, in the off chances that I have responded on a weekend or too late, usually I'll get a response back from somebody. And this actually I found is in corporate too. I'll get a response back of, oh, I didn't expect to hear from you. I thought you didn't check email this late. And then I'm kind of like, all right, guilty. I shouldn't have checked my email. But I have something very, very similar in my day job. In my day job, it just says I work from this time to this time, these days of the week, and I'm out of office on these days. And that's the final piece that I really love about doing something like this, is this communicates your boundaries from the get-go with anybody who is talking to you, anybody you're communicating with, whether it is a prospective client, a current client, a coworker, or a boss. This is communicating from the get-go. These are my work hours. This is when you can expect to hear from me. And in that case, then when somebody comes back and says, oh, I thought you were still working at this time, they really can't argue with the fact that every single email you send has that below your email signature. I have gotten so many comments about this. I've talked about it on podcasts. I talked about it when I spoke at LinkedIn. I highly recommend doing something like this to set those boundaries. The final piece, I think this is the last part in this first step, is a very, very important reminder for all of us that say, oh, but I'm just really passionate about the work I do. You know, I can't do these things because I'm just really passionate. And it's okay because I'm passionate, I'm not going to burn out. That is a fallacy. Gary Vee is actually one of the most, I think, popular people on the planet who has said something exactly like this. He says, oh, you only burn out if you don't love what you do. That is, I'm going to swear, that is bullshit. They've actually done studies on this, and passion does not prevent burnout. In fact, it actually adds to your likelihood of burning out. The people who are passionate are the people who often have trouble turning off. And actually, you know what I'm going to do? I want to stop sharing for just a second to talk about this, because this is what I've been running into lately. I went live on Instagram earlier today sharing that I have felt very run down lately. I really have. I think I might be getting sick. I think that's part of the reason why I'm feeling run down, but I have been feeling very, very run down this week. I was kind of thinking about it. I have a lot of symptoms of physical burnout, which we're going to talk a little bit later. I have a headache that won't go away. I'm feeling very tired and very lethargic, and I'm usually not like that. And I thought about it, and I thought about all of these stuff that I want to do this year and all of the goals that I have for this year. And I am a high achiever, probably just like you. And I am pumped for everything that I put on my plate. I am so excited about these various things that I am working on, even the stuff for my day job. I did not set a goal this year that I wasn't pumped about, that I wasn't excited about. And that's actually also part of the problem that all of us deal with and all of us experience, is we are genuinely excited about the stuff we're doing. And therefore, it's really hard to stop. It's really hard to slow down. That's why I say passion does not prevent burnout. This is important to know, because I don't know what the copying that was responding to, Carla, but passion does not prevent burnout. And we have to be very aware of this and know that if we start to feel those things, we have to step back. We have to give ourselves a pause to recuperate and recover, because that excitement is going to fade if we don't check it, if we don't make sure we're taking care of ourselves in the process. So I wanted to touch on that, because this has been something I have been experiencing lately, and it has been tough to try to overcome. Oops, what is happening? Hold on, I'm sorry. Oh, I want to go this screen. Sorry, I shared the wrong screen. That's why I went all crazy. Okay. So that's what I've got to say about sustainable mindset. But let's talk a little bit about what it means to have sustainable systems. This part of this is going to be a little bit more of a show and tell section. I'm going to give you guys lots of insights into my systems from a business perspective, as well as from just kind of a general perspective. When I think of your systems being sustainable, what I think about is all of the things that make your business run. The calendars that you have, the apps that you use, the content strategies that you utilize, the offers that you're putting out there, how all of those things fit together to help you run your business. And if they can, and if your systems can sustain everything that's going on in your business and frankly in your life. That's what I mean when I talk about sustainable systems. And the reason why this is so important is if we don't have good systems, this is where me being a productivity nerd kind of actually is a good thing. If we don't have good systems, overwhelm, burnout will inevitably come. The interesting thing kind of with how I've been feeling lately, I am not overwhelmed. I'm just tired. I'm just tired, which means I probably need a little bit more of the self-care that we're going to talk about at the end of this. I'll admit it. I'll be completely transparent. I do this work because I am you and I struggle with the same things you struggle with. And I understand and recognize the importance of being consistent. But I'm sorry, that was a tangent. This is really important because of overwhelm burnout. If your life feels like one big to-do list and you feel like you are absolutely drowning in tasks and commitments and heck, even ideas that you feel like you're constantly having to juggle in your head, that's overwhelm burnout. This is the productivity side of burnout. And what this one looks like is an inability to turn off. If your head hits the pillow at the end of the night and it is absolutely spinning with ideas and worries and anxieties and concerns, that's a big sign of overwhelm burnout. If you're finding that you can't handle change or start projects or make decisions, especially if you're typically very capable of doing that, that's another sign of overwhelm burnout. If you, and I love this expression because I feel like it's so true, have too many tabs open in your brain and you're constantly trying to figure out, oh my God, which tab do I need to go to find the information that I need? That is another sign of overwhelm burnout. And lastly, this is really about being over-engaged in your work. A lot of people say burnout is about under-engagement. You disengage. I completely disagree. I think some forms of burnout are like that. I think emotional burnout is absolutely like that. But when it's overwhelm burnout, you are usually in overwhelm burnout because you overengage, because you can't turn off. So that's what this section really, really helps with. So if this is you, if this is one that you're feeling, drop something in the comment. I can't talk. Drop something in the chat box. That's what I meant to say. And let me know, because this is definitely a big one. And I'm going to hopefully give you lots of tips to help with this. But the first part I want to talk about is the things I see most business owners do wrong. This is actually a little series that I've been doing on Instagram. So if you've seen my Instagram reels, this is what I've been talking about. The things I see business owners do wrong the most. They commit to a content and or launch schedule that they can't actually maintain. I actually find the content schedule is the big one. They feel the need to be on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, have a podcast, and I can't even, and TikTok. And I was like, what other social media platforms are out there? Oh, and Pinterest and Twitter. They feel the need to be in all of those places at once and they can't sustain it. I did that wrong when I was an early business owner. But now I'll show you some of my systems for what I do with content. The next one, they keep information in way too many different places. I also used to do this. I had some stuff on my phone. I had some stuff in, what did I use? I used Paper Planner. But I didn't like using my paper planner to keep track of lists and ideas. So I had lists and ideas in like Google Docs or on ClickUp or on Trello. At one point in time, I'm pretty sure I had information for my business in at least half a dozen different places, if not more. So keeping information in way too many places, that just makes it really hard to access that information and to know where something is. Next is they don't take advantage of automations and templates and even workflows in their business. You know, if there are things that are recurring tasks, can you automate them? If there are things that you do over and over and over again in your business, can you create a workflow? If there are things that you like templates and presentations and documents that you send over and over again, can you create a template for that? These are kind of ways to delegate when you don't actually have the money to hire a VA or another team member. Use technology to help you delegate. They try to reinvent the wheel and don't take advantage of templates. I already talked about that one. I forgot that was there. And then next, they keep their work and personal life too separate. Now, that might be how you define work-life balance, but I'm actually going to give you a reason a little bit later for why it's actually a good thing to have some understanding of how do the work and personal lives fit together? Like what happens and does it look like when I overlay them on top of each other? We're going to talk about that in just a second. So let's talk a little bit about sustainable systems from a content perspective. First and foremost, what I recommend from a sustainable systems perspective is to decide what your priorities are. Because as I alluded to earlier, you can't be on all platforms at once. The only people who are business owners who are on all platforms at once are like the big companies who have full-blown social media teams, or the hotshot like 7-8 figure entrepreneurs that have entire teams dedicated to that, who have people that handle that for them. If you are a solopreneur, you cannot be on all platforms at once. Like, just give yourself permission right now to not do that. Next, committing to a posting schedule that you can actually maintain. Now, I'll give podcasts as an example here. I feel like the going thing on podcasts right now is to do a 2 times a week podcast, post a new podcast episode twice a week. I could never sustain that. I tried at one point in time, and frankly, the only reason I could do it at that point in time was because I didn't have as much going on. I didn't have any work to do in my business. Transparency. And I wasn't very busy in my day job. That's the only reason I can do it. But even then, it was stressful and it was really hard to stay on top of. I cannot commit to that. Some people can, I cannot. So actually, when I started my podcast, I said it was going to be a monthly podcast because I knew I could at least push out 1 podcast every month. In fact, that's my minimum. If I get into a busy season and I can't commit to the posting schedule I'm doing right now with my podcast, which is once a week, then I will dial it back to like bi-weekly or once a month. I am allowing myself, and I give myself that permission to make that modification because my minimum is monthly. So that's kind of another way to think about it. If you have something like that, that ideally you would like to do it more than you're doing it, okay, that's fine to have an ideal goal, but what's the minimum? What's the minimum that you can maintain? I also highly recommend keeping a running list of ideas so that you can always have something to pull from. I'm going to show you how I do that in just a second. And then lastly, come up with a workflow and repurpose. So I don't remember what order I put these slides in, but I actually want to go ahead and show you how I do this right now inside of my business. So I have my Coach Ellen section of my Notion, and then let's go over to my content creation hub. So inside of my content creation hub, and again, this is actually, exactly what I have inside of the Burned Out Business Owners bundle, and it's in the entire digital planner. So if you have the Notion Anti-Burnout Digital Planner, which Carla, I know you're on here, you have this. But one of the first things I do is I kind of outline my goals. Like, what's my main platform? I know I have 3 main platforms here, but you're going to see why that actually is okay and it works in just a second. I have secondary platforms, and I have kind of my aims and my goals. I don't ever use this content calendar plan section. I should probably take it out. But I also have down here, I have the different social medias that I'm kind of staying on top of. But probably the most important part of this, I want to show you some of the workflows that I have and some of the ideas that I have. So I have this content ideas section. Every single thing in here is an idea. And how I do this is I actually have a quick capture page inside of my Notion. I use it for notes that I need to create or tasks that I want to make sure I remember to do. But down at the bottom of it is this content idea section. And whenever I come up with an idea for a social media post, I add it to this content idea section. So if I have an idea for a newsletter, I add it over here. If I have an idea for a blog, I add it over here. Podcast, I'll add it over here. Anytime I come up with an idea, and the beautiful thing about why I like to use Notion is I can access it from my phone. So that's the other big reason why I like having this system is anytime I have an idea, I write it down. I think that's really important, just a general thing in life. Anytime you think of an idea, write it down. Anytime you think of like a piece of copy for your website or something that you need to remember to do, write it down. Our brains are terrible at remembering things. I write everything down. And this is really kind of, you can start to see that here. But I also want to show you in here my workflows that I use. So I use, I have various different, actually, I'm going to go in here. I have various different templates for the different types of content that they are inside of my Notion digital planner. And let's look at the one that's a multi-purpose, because underneath it, I have the different steps that I need to remember to do. This is me building a workflow. Whenever I multi-purpose a piece of content, I will usually start by outlining the things that I want to talk about. Then, and this is what works for me, it may not be what works for you, I write a blog about whatever that outline is. And I like to do this before I record the podcast or record the YouTube video, because it helps me to kind of formulate my thoughts. I think more slowly when I write. So as I'm writing, I can kind of figure out, how do I want to say things? How do I want to address this? Do I actually even like this idea? I can figure that out as I write the blog. Then I outline any announcements or advertisements that I want to put at the start of the podcast. Typically, I don't usually do those on YouTube. I then record the podcast. And usually what I do is I will record the YouTube video and the podcast simultaneously. Like I will have my camera set up over here, and then I have Audacity set up over here, and I'm doing it simultaneously to save time. And then I have creating graphics, show notes pages, so on and so forth. So I have a workflow for literally every different type of content inside of my business. I have a workflow for it, just to make it easier so I don't have to think so much about everything that needs to be done. This is saving me mental bandwidth. So again, if you are somebody in corporate, you can do the same thing with any repeated action you take inside of your corporate job. What are the things you have to do every time you do this? Build a workflow so that you don't have to think about it each time you have something new. So those are some sneak peeks into my systems inside of Notion for how I kind of organize my content creation. Actually, I'll show you one more thing. Let's just go back to here. This can be easier to get to it. I have a project manager as well inside of Notion. And this is me laying out everything that is going on inside the content part of my business. So the newsletter that I'm going to send, the thing that's going to go out next week, which actually this is already recorded, and actually I can move it to ready to publish because it is. But any piece of content that goes out goes in here. So I can keep in mind, and I can have an idea of, am I putting too much on my plate? Do I need to make any modifications? Is there a piece of content I don't like? So on and so forth. So that's what I do for the content part of my business. See, lots of behind the scenes sneak peeks happening in this. All right. The next thing that I think is super important when it comes to your systems, and again, whether you're a business owner or not, is to simplify, is to centralize. This is a system that is based on a book that I read called Building a Second Brain. I am obsessed with this. This system, not only is it centralized, and when I say centralized, what I mean by that is everything is all in one location. That's what I mean when I say centralized. And what that does is it makes it so much easier to find things. Like with Notion in particular, I'm literally going to pull this guy back in. I can search anytime I want to find something. I can search. So like, for example, I did the CEO retreat earlier this year. I can search for, okay, what did I do during the CEO retreat? And I can start to look through all of the different things I did. If I wanted to find a note from my precision nutrition certification, I can just type in PN because that's how I abbreviated all of them. And I can find all of the notes for my precision nutrition certification. That's the beauty of something that's centralized, is it makes it so much easier for you to quickly access any note, any task, any piece of information you might need. I also think that is, as much as I love paper planners, like I am a reformed paper everything person, my parents would probably die of shock if they found out that I don't use a paper planner anymore, because I was that girl growing up. But that is the beauty of a digital system too, is that searchability and that ease of finding things. The other benefit of this system is it's accessible everywhere. This system, it's the key to it is you need an app or some sort of software that you can access on different devices. And I can access Notion on my iPad, my phone, my computer to make it super easy for me to get to the information I need. I even use Notion for grocery shopping. Seriously. It's also flexible. There's a lot of ability to adapt the system to what you need. Do you need notes? Do you need task management? And does your system is it flexible enough to adapt to those different needs? Is it automated? Automations are going to be huge. We're going to talk about those in just a second. And then is it replicable? Can you make, like we just looked at a second ago, templates, workflows that you can replicate inside of your system easily? So when it comes to deciding what system you might want to use for this, maybe you already have a system. Maybe you're a Notion nerd like I am. Maybe you already have a system. Maybe you want to experiment with a different system, but I recommend testing out your different options. I recommend though looking for something that can handle notes and tasks and that connects to an external system like Zapier, which we're going to talk about a little bit later as well. My favorite apps for doing this, I will say, I've used all three of these. I really like Evernote, Notion, and ClickUp. Obviously, it's no surprise that my favorite one right now is Notion, but I have used all three of these, and all three of these have different benefits and perks to them. It sometimes just depends on preference. If you're not sure which one to use, I did do a training that is available inside of the Inner Circle membership where I talk about this building a second brain system, and I help you determine which might be the best system for you. I link to some outside resources as well as discuss some of the different types of note taking for different personalities and what system might work best for that personality type. So these are my favorite apps. I'm a Notion nerd. I love Notion, but there are definitely other options if you don't like using Notion. One note I will say when it comes to simplifying and centralizing your systems is it is going to depend a little bit on your productivity style. Integrators aren't going to mind having everything kind of dumped into one location, but segmenters typically, especially if you're a very strict segmenter, they are going to like having things a little bit more separate. So that's something to take into consideration. I will once again shout out to Notion. One thing I like about Notion is that I can have literally everything in one view. Like when I look at my dashboard view, this is everything from all different aspects of my life, all in one view. But I also have the ability to segment it. Like if I go inside of my business, the things for my business are going to show up just in here. So these are all of my business related tasks down here. I can even take it more narrow than that and focus on the membership inside of my business, my ABC memberships inside of my business. And these are all of the tasks that are related to my ABC memberships. So it is segmented down if I want it to be. To give you a non-business example, I even have the ability to look at things for what's a good example here? I even have the ability to kind of streamline and look even smaller down to like relationship related tasks. Mostly a lot of this is notes, not necessarily tasks. That was maybe a bad example, but like here's an example for my health. So this is the health part of my life, segmented down to just looking at health. Those are the tasks there. So there is the ability to do that inside of Notion if you wanted to. So think about what your productivity style is because that might impact what system you might want to use. Sustainable systems, as I mentioned, also mean templates. You already saw that I have templates for the various different content creation parts of my business. And then I can drag those into my tasks. I also have templates for like, for example, my podcast. I have every time I go into Audacity, we're literally show and tell. I'm going to show this up. Every single time I go into Audacity for my podcast, I go into recent files and I click this template because this is the template that I use every single time I record a podcast. It's got my intro music. It's got my intro. It's got my outro out here. And then I just drop the audio for my podcast in the middle of it. So I have a template for that. I have templates. I swear by Canva. I absolutely swear by Canva. This is literally, oh, why did you log me out? I'm literally like inside of my Canva right now. Okay, there we go. If for Canva, I have so much stuff inside of Canva. This is the presentation we're looking at right now. I have Mighty Networks templates. I have templates for my podcast, my YouTube. I have templates for everything inside of Canva as well. And again, the idea here is ease. You want to make it as easy as humanly possible for you to be able to get the work done you need to get done. So what can you create a template for? Even in my business, I have templates for my blog and for my podcast. I'm trying to figure out what the heck, where those are. I actually think I need to escape. So for my blog and my podcast on my website, if I go in here, I literally just duplicate this existing template, like this existing layout every time I write a blog so that I don't have to recreate anything. I just have to change the text and the image. This is the template that I work off of every single time. Same thing in my podcast. I just go in and I duplicate this template every single time I have a new podcast that I need to put out. So just make it as easy as humanly possible on yourself to be able to do the things in your business or in your career. If anything is repeated or reused, templatize it, automate it, make a workflow for yourself so that it is as easy as possible for you to do your work. Yeah, even this presentation, it's a template. Everything in my life is a template. The next important part of systems is, and we're already at an hour. Ellen, you're taking extra time today. I know, I'm sorry, I didn't intend this to be as long as it is, but I hope you guys are getting value out of it and I hope you're enjoying it. If anybody needs to leave, since it is at an hour and I thought this was only going to go for an hour, feel free to step away. There will be a recording of this if you need to step away. Okay. The next piece of sustainable systems is about automations. I am a massive fan of Zapier. And there are other automation softwares and platforms out there. I think one of them is called Made or something like that. There was one, it used to be Integromat. I don't remember what it's called now, but there's various different platforms out there that do automations. I use Zapier a lot and I use it to put all of the sales that are coming in from my Stripe account into my finance tracker. I have prospective clients in my CRM and that is automated to populate in my CRM. Facebook leads go straight to my email client. I use Flowdesk. I use it to keep an updated list of the members inside of my Anti-Burnout Collective memberships. I use it to tag subscribers in my email list. I even use it to save Zoom recordings because I don't know about you, but I get very sick of the emails from Zoom saying that I'm over my storage limit. Like, I use Zapier for so much, and I will admit that it is a teeny bit techie to set up Zapier. Let me kind of show you a little bit of the inside of it. That's not what we want. It is a teeny bit techie, but there's tons of tutorials out there, and I'm actually going to be recording some stuff that will be going inside of the Inner Circle membership to kind of facilitate getting started. But you can see these are all different. They call them zaps that I use to basically run a lot of the repetitive tasks inside of my business. I even use Zapier to populate and update all of my calendar events from my Google Calendar into Notion. So I know what my schedule is for that day without having to look at my calendar. I just have to look at Notion. So having those automations to, again, streamline, make things as easy as possible, that's the point of using something like Zapier. And again, if you need help with something like that, I will be recording videos and putting some of those inside of the Inner Circle like very soon. I should literally show you guys the amount of things that I have that I want to create and put inside of the membership. So the other part of automations is automating tasks. Any recurring business tasks that you have, you can put inside of your systems. I put cleaning tasks inside of my recurring tasks. I put personal hygiene tasks like changing my contacts, tax payment reminders. I even prioritize my tasks using automations. So when we look at my Notion, this is sorting things based on priority, based on an automation that I set up. I also have all of these recurring tasks set up inside of my Notion so that I don't have to remember to add something to my task list. These are automated to show up at specific times inside of my task list. This is what I mean by automating. And again, it's just to take pressure off your brain, take pressure off of you from having to remember things inside of your business and in your life. Because you can see, I use it for things that are not business related as well. So setting up those automations. I just discovered a very easy way to do this inside of Notion that doesn't require any external plugins, but even systems like ClickUp do this as well. Evernote is more of a note storage system. Evernote doesn't necessarily do this particularly well, but just about every other app does. So again, anything that you can do in your systems to take the pressure off of your brain to remember, the better. That is the whole point of sustainable systems, is automating, templatizing, creating workflows to take the pressure off of you to have to remember and do so much actively. Let those things happen in the background so you can do what you do best: create, think, innovate, come up with ideas, and really drive your business forward. The last thing I want to touch on when it comes to sustainable systems is calendars. And this is where I kind of harken back to what I said before about making sure that there is a little bit of overlap and the ability to see how your personal life and your business fit together. Now, the reason why I like to show it this way is if we were to just look at individual parts of my life, look how empty my calendar is. If we just look at my day job, this is what my calendar looks like. If we just look at my personal commitments, this is what my calendar looks like. And actually, this was even in excess because I realized that some of these things were meetings in here that should not have been showing up on my personal calendar. If we just look at my coaching calendar, even like the scheduled required commitments that I need to show up to in my coaching calendar, this is what it looks like. None of those calendars, when we look at them individually, look that overwhelming, look that full. But look what happens when we layer them on top of each other. Now, all of a sudden, this is much more chaotic. This is much more overwhelming and overloaded. This is what I realized about my own systems when I wasn't doing this enough. I wasn't overlaying my personal life with my business, my business with my day job. When I wasn't looking at all of those things together, that's when my life started to get really, really overloaded like this. And I was having like 10-hour work days. So that's why it's so important to have the ability to see things together all in one view. So then you start to understand the answer to this question, which is how full is your plate? If your calendar looks like this all the time, you may not know it if you're just looking at your personal life, if you're just looking at your business. You may not know that your life is this full, that you have this much on your plate. But if we're able to see them together, then we have much more clarity. I think sometimes we forget that each new commitment, whether it's personal related or business related, is something else that we are putting on our plate. I love the analogy of a plate for this because it ultimately doesn't matter if it's work or if it's personal. It is something that you are putting on your plate. And we have to kind of ask ourselves, is my plate just kind of a nice filling meal? Is that how full my plate is? Or is that like American Thanksgiving all day, every day? You know, if your plate is so overflowing with commitments and obligations all the time, it's okay if it's just a season or just a week or just a day. But if every single day, every single week, every single month, this is what your calendar looks like, that's not sustainable. And frankly, this isn't even that busy of a week in my calendar. They can get much worse than this. If I showed you my calendar from last week, it could potentially look worse than this. But if we don't know that, we can't prepare for that. We can't refill our cup. We can't give ourselves the rejuvenation and refueling that we need if we don't know that. That's why it's so important to have the ability to overlay your calendar. So you know how full your plate is. So you know what all is on it. And so you know whether your systems and whether yourself can sustain everything that's on your plate. So that is our sustainable systems section. That took a little bit longer than I thought it would. I got excited about sharing things. All right, last but not least, what does it mean to have sustainable self-care? This is our last section. Sustainable self-care, in my opinion, is twofold. It is about what can help you sustain everything that you do. So what's going to keep your energy levels up? What's going to keep you feeling good? But it also has to be sustainable itself, meaning we need to be able to maintain our self-care habits. Again, I've seen, and I've been guilty of this, I've seen a lot of people who, in an effort to try to make sure that they are taking care of themselves, they turn their self-care into another to-do list that they need to stay on top of. Another list of commitments and obligations that they're putting on themselves that frankly add to their stress. I actually went live in our ABC community on my $7 a month membership earlier today, talking about the biggest mistake that you can make when it comes to self-care. And in a nutshell, it was stressing yourself, trying to make your self-care perfect. That's the biggest mistake we can make, but we do it. And when we do that, when we either aren't taking care of ourselves or we're doing too much, physical burnout is one of the consequences of that. This is the one I talked about earlier. This is when you feel like you're so exhausted and strung out that, you know, we don't feel like anything's going to help. You know, it's when you get 12 hours of sleep a night the entire weekend and yet you still feel like you can't get out of bed Monday morning. Physical burnout looks like getting sick more frequently. It looks like changes in your basic self-care pattern. So like maybe you're normally a morning person and now you're not. You know, maybe you can't wake up after a typical amount of sleep. That's what I mean by changes in your basic self-care patterns. Maybe you have changes in your appetite. You go from being never hungry to hungry all the time, or vice versa. And then lastly, low mood. These are all potential consequences and things to look out for that might be signs that you're veering toward physical burnout. And trust me when I say I've experienced some of these things recently, and I am aware that I need to make some changes. When we talk about self-care, how I think about it is thinking about the things that you do to refill your cup. Because for most of us, we have spent all day, all week pouring into others. Self-care is about what are you doing that is pouring back into you. That's really what this section is about. And what I want to do here is I want to frame self-care in a few different ways, because we tend to think about self-care as like getting a massage or working out or sleeping. But self-care is actually so much more than that. Self-care can be physical. It can be sleeping and getting a massage and getting in a workout. That is absolutely a part of self-care. But self-care is also mental. If that boredom burnout piece that I talked about earlier really resonated with you, you might need some mental self-care. Mental self-care is about doing things that are intellectually stimulating, like reading or doing Sudoku or just learning something new. Maybe you want to learn a language. That's mental self-care. Social self-care, which I will admit, I have a little bit of a homebody kind of hermit lifestyle. This is one that I'm really actively working on. Social self-care is about spending time with your people, the people you love, whether they are family or friends. How much of that are you giving to yourself? And is it enough? Spiritual self-care. This I think of, it doesn't necessarily have to be religion. It can be, but I think of it about connection. Are you spending that time in connection, whether it's connection to a higher power or connection to yourself or connection to nature? People get spiritual self-care in a variety of different ways. And are you giving yourself that? And then lastly, emotional self-care. Are you giving yourself safe spaces to manage and process negative emotions? I rejoined therapy about 5 days ago. So that's kind of a safe space for me. I journal a lot. I self-reflect a lot, but I also want to be able to talk to somebody to help me find the blind spots that I'm not seeing in my own life. That's a form of emotional self-care. So these are all forms of self-care. And typically we naturally prioritize certain types of self-care and deprioritize others. That is okay. That is very, very natural. The trick is figuring out which one you're deprioritizing and that you know you need more of. If I had to vote for myself right now, it's this one through and through. I actually do really good at the other four. This is often the one I'm lacking. A lot of my friends don't live near me. A lot of them either, like a lot of the people I've connected with in the women's network, the women business owners network, they live across the country. A lot of even my best friends, they live across the country too, because I met them while I was traveling in 2018. So this is definitely something I'm actively working on. So what might that be for you? It's also about realizing that there are different forms of rest. Again, when we think of rest, we often think of physical rest. We think of sleeping. But even physical rest, there's more to it than that. Physical rest can be both active and passive. It can be sleeping and it can be stretching. Both of those are forms of physical rest. Emotional rest is very similar to emotional self-care, so I'm going to skip it. Mental rest, this is another one that I feel like I'm probably not getting enough of. Mental rest is, especially if you do intensive knowledge work, it's giving your brain a break. That's like when you want to watch like trash TV, like I'll admit it, I have seen every season of Too Hot to Handle on Netflix. It's like a guilty pleasure. That is mental rest. I don't have to think. I can just purely be entertained and laugh at the ridiculousness. That's mental rest. And do you give yourself enough of that? Social rest is for the person who is socially overcommitted. Maybe you have the exact opposite problem that I have. But if you have too much social commitment, when's the time that you give yourself to just be alone? Do you get enough of that? Spiritual rest similarly it's similar to spiritual self-care, so we'll skip that one. Sensory rest is another big one that I think a lot of us don't get enough of. I mean, shoot, my setup right now is not conducive to sensory rest. It is after sunset here, and I am staring at two backlit screens with a light above me, an artificial light right above me. That is not conducive to sensory rest. Sensory rest is about giving your senses a break. Do you spend time in quiet? Do you spend time in darkness? Do you spend time where you're not being constantly stimulated by like things on your body? I feel like the big one for me is time in silence and time without like a screen in front of me. That's how I get sensory rest. And then lastly, creative rest. Are you giving yourself rest from the creativity you have to do? And it does not have to just be art. Problem solving and troubleshooting are also creativity. So there are various forms of rest that, similarly to the self-care, we need to figure out which one we're deprioritizing and find ways to prioritize it. Now, I can totally understand if on those last few slides, you're kind of thinking to yourself, but Ellen, you're talking about sustainability and yet you just gave me 12 different things to add to my to-do list. No, I did not. My expectation is never for any of us, including myself, that we do all 12 of these things at all times. What I recommend is this: know your minimums. First and foremost, know which of these things that you need to prioritize. So going back through those types of self-care, those types of rest, which ones are you feeling like you are lacking, that you need more of? Pick like a couple, maybe like 2 or 3. And then ask yourself, what is the minimum that I need to do to complete this, to do this, to kind of check that box, if you will. So for example, fitness. Ideally, maybe you want to work out 30 to 45 minutes each day. I don't know, maybe that's your ambition. The minimum could become movement, period. Maybe you want to read, maybe mental self-care is a goal of yours. It could be 30 to 60 minutes of reading. That might be the ideal. But as we know, that is not always sustainable. So maybe the minimum becomes 5 or 10 minutes of reading. Meditating, maybe your goal is 10 to 15 minutes, or I will admit one of my ambitious goals recently has been to meditate twice a day for 10 to 15 minutes. Not going very well recently, but I'm trying. Maybe instead it becomes meditating for 2 minutes instead of 10 to 15 minutes. The reason why this is a better way to approach self-care is because this is planning for the fact that life will get busy and you will not always be able to engage in the ideal. I'm not sure if I put this quote in here. Nope, I didn't. So I'm going to say it here. There's a quote from the guy who wrote Atomic Habits, and I'm paraphrasing it here. But he said something along the lines of, we tend to set goals and make habits for our best day when we should do it for our worst. We tend to think of our goals and our habits of, oh, in a perfect world, this is what I would do. But it's never a perfect world. We're always busy. We're always tired. We always feel strung out. So instead of setting ourselves up for failure with this ideal vision, what if we set ourselves up for success by instead thinking in terms of minimums? This is a great way to approach self-care. This is actually how I built my morning routine that I love, and I'm actually genuinely excited to engage in every morning, and it's very, very fills me back up completely, is by doing minimums. I set a minimum amount of meditation, a minimum amount of reading, a minimum amount of movement, all of these different things that I wanted to do. I set it as minimums, and then I built on it because the minimums were vastly easier to check off the list. So know your minimums. The bottom line when it comes to self-care, though, is it's about putting your oxygen mask on first. First, not last, not somewhere in between, first. And some ways in which we could do this, to give you some tactical ways to do this, is by scheduling that self-care into your calendar. You know how I mentioned before that your calendar is like sacred space? I'm going to actually turn off my day job calendar for this. But your calendar is sacred space. And you can see my calendar can get pretty busy. I am super not doing this tomorrow. But I put on my calendar those moments of self-care because I want that to take up space in my life. I put on my calendar when I'm going to engage in my mindful morning. That's what I call my morning routine. I put on my calendar when I'm going to work out. I'm experimenting with scheduling my second meditation. It's not going particularly well, but I'm trying. I even scheduled that I want to take my perfect Saturday this Saturday. I schedule when I want to write because this is like, it's fiction writing. It's fun. It's something I do just kind of for creativity. I schedule into my calendar when I want to make sure I decompress. I put these things in my calendar because even if they don't happen exactly when I put them in the calendar, then I'll drag them around to where they fit next so that I can make sure that they are still taking up space in my life. If I end up working right after this community check-in tomorrow, I can drag this to later in the day, and I'm still making space for that in my life. Does writing happen every night? Nope. But by putting it on my calendar, I'm saying this is important. This is something that I'm doing to refill myself. So that is equally as important as kind of making the rough game plan in your head, is putting it into your calendar. Even if it's imperfect, even if it doesn't always happen at the time you schedule it, you are saying, hey, this is worth taking up space in my life. You can also create a self-care schedule. This is something I dive much more deeply into in both my $7 a month Anti-Burnout Collective community and also in my Anti-Burnout Collective Inner Circle membership, which we're going to talk about in just a second. You can create a self-care plan as well and a self-care schedule that can really suit your productivity style. So if you're a segmenter, you might block out specific time in the morning that you dedicate to your self-care, kind of like I do. Mornings are definitely my self-care time. Or for integrators, maybe you schedule those personal things first in your calendar and you fill in the business things and the career-related activities around them. That's a way you can approach creating a self-care schedule if you are an integrator. So think back to what we talked about before for your different type of productivity style, how you think of work-life balance, and try to adapt building your self-care schedule around that. And again, use your calendar to determine if it's too much. That's actually something I was playing around with earlier today with kind of my goals and my self-care. And it did turn out to be too much. Once I actually put it into my calendar, it was just overscheduled and I didn't like it. That's okay. This is all about experimentation. This is going to require trial and error. So put on your lab coat, put on your goggles, whatever, tap into that inner scientist and just experiment. Just figure out what works for you. You likely will not get it right the first time, and that is so okay. It is so okay. The end goal with all of this when it comes to self-care, and frankly, even when it comes to everything else we've talked about today, is about creating habits and routines. I really feel like a lot of burnout and stress prevention comes down to the habits and routines in your life and how those habits and routines support your productivity, support your self-care, support your mindset. That's really what this is about creating. I have routines for myself around self-care, those mindful mornings. That is my self-care time. That is where 90% of my self-care activities happen, is during that time. I have routines, my weekly review that I do to make sure I'm not overwhelmed and that my systems are sustaining me and I don't have too many goals happening. I try to intentionally incorporate new hobbies and fun time into my schedule, as you saw. It's all about those routines and those habits and how they are serving you toward creating the kind of lifestyle that you want. So if there's something that's not working, again, that's a data point for you. That's a moment to say, okay, this isn't working for me. I'm going to make note of that. And I'm going to brainstorm and experiment with some ways that I can change it, whether we're talking about your systems, your self-care, or your mindset. So that is it. I did go significantly longer than I meant to. I'm so sorry. I got excited. I hope it was valuable to you, but these are my tips for preventing burnout, whether you're a business owner or a career, you have a career, you're corporate. I hope you took something from this that you can use, because this requires sustainability in your mindset, in your systems, in your self-care, and perhaps beyond that, it requires consistency. Everything when it comes to burnout and stress prevention requires you to be consistent. So when it comes to your mindset, if I had to kind of summarize it, know your values, know your definition of success, and know your perspective on work-life balance. When it comes to your systems, make sure you're leveraging automations and templates. Make sure your system is simple. And make sure that you're not overcommitting yourself by keeping a master calendar and a master task list. That's what I call it when you can see everything all in one view. And then lastly, your self-care. This is about sustaining yourself and your work ethic, but also just making sure you're not taking on too much, even when it comes to your health. So that's it. That's what I've got from you. And I have one final announcement. For any of you who are on this that might be interested, I know I talked a lot about my membership a lot in this webinar. I have a special sale happening right now. The price for the membership went up at the start of the new year, but I decided to open back up the founder pricing of the Inner Circle for the next week. What that means is instead of the $49 a month Inner Circle pricing, the price is going to be dropping back down to $27 a month for the next week. So if you were really resonating with some of the stuff we were talking about in here, things like values and systems, you get access to my Notion digital planner inside of the Inner Circle. If those things resonated with you, if the self-care, building a self-care schedule resonated with you, I think you're going to benefit tremendously from this membership. And at $27 a month, has so much information inside of it in a non-overwhelming way, I promise. There's so much inside of it that you can access and work your way through, and I'm there to support you as you do. So if that is something you are interested in, if you want to join, I'm going to go ahead and show you really quickly before we wrap up how you can do that. So from inside of this space, you can go ahead and scroll down. Actually, I think it might look a little bit different than what I see, but you can go ahead and you can scroll down to the memberships here. So just click where it says memberships and you will see what is available. This is our Inner Circle membership right here that you can go ahead and click on and join. And then for anybody who is watching this, since I am going to be sharing the recording, who is not inside of this community that I just showed here, just go to coachellen.com/membership, click join now, and you will see your different options to join. So that is what I've got for you all today. Thank you so much. If you've got any questions, feel free to let me know. You can always find me on Instagram. You can find me inside of this community. Take advantage, shoot me a message. Let's start a chat. Let me know if you've got any questions. I'm happy to support you and help you out. But with that, I am signing off. I'm going to make myself some dinner. I hope all of you enjoyed this. I will be posting the recording soon as it processes. But I hope you all have a great rest of your night. Bye, everybody.